So now it is my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who also did work in Derek van der Kooij's lab, and his name is Dr. Brian Ballios. But he's been very generous with us and has spoken at many of our events, so hopefully it will be a familiar face to some of you. I'm very pleased to introduce Dr. Ballios because he was the inaugural recipient of our Clinician Scientist Emerging Leader Award. So this is a very important award because Science Sam was talking about all this incredible basic science work in the laboratory, studying cells under a dish, and that is fantastic. We need all of that work, but we also need people with the incredible expertise required to then take that knowledge and see if you can test out potential new treatments in humans. And so this is where Dr. Balios comes in, because not only does he have that laboratory knowledge, he's also a physician who is in his final years training to be an ophthalmologist. He's the chief resident this year, and so it's my honor to introduce Dr. Brian Ballios. And before I give the full stage to Dr. Ballios, I just want to take the opportunity to really recognize some sponsors that Anne mentioned earlier, Bank of Montreal, BMO, and Bayer, because without their support, we wouldn't have this Clinician Scientist Emerging Leader Award that allows us to have this incredible talent right here in Canada. So thank you, BMO, and thank you, Bayer. Now, Dr. Ballios.
Wow, that was a terrific introduction. Thank you. And I think this is the first time, and Mary's right, I have spoken before for Foundation Fighting Blindness, but this is my first time ever speaking on behalf of Fighting Blindness Canada. And so I'm very excited. That's a tough act to follow. Dr. Samantha Yamin, incredible tour de force and talking about where we come from and thinking about developmental biology, and these are the concepts we think about in the lab every day. But I don't want to go too far into the science, because I think she gave a wonderful introduction to biology and the importance of understanding our biology. I want to focus on the fact that we're gathered here tonight to celebrate the incredible journey that the Foundation Fighting Blindness has made in transforming itself, now as Fighting Blindness Canada, into the #1 charitable organization supporting vision research here in Canada. And today it takes its first step. Yes, that's right. Today it takes its first step into the transformation into FBC. Transformative in scope, and I think we could all agree that it will be transformative in impact. This organization has been a cornerstone of support for my own personal journey towards becoming both a physician and a scientist. I started my training as an engineer, focused on using science to solve the practical problems of engineering, design, scale-up, and dilemmas. But I quickly found my path into medicine, which I've said for years I see as the ultimate applied science. I think there's no more human calling than the treatment of human health and human disease. Academically, I was intrigued by the eye and vision, arguably, I think, our most important sense. It's the gateway to our understanding and our appreciation of the world around us. Without sight, mundane tasks and accomplishments become insurmountable. My PhD studies, which Mary touched on when she introduced me, drew together my aptitude for design, my curiosity with materials, and particularly biomaterials, and how we could apply that to the regenerative potential that stem cells represent to treat blinding eye disease. And I could say we've come very far in the potential to use stem cells to produce those cells that are going to be important for vision in our eyes and for new therapies. And we're uncovering the potential of those same cells that Dr. Yamin mentioned that build our bodies, those embryonic stem cells, and how they can also be applied to regeneration of the eye. And in its previous incarnation, the FFB fostered this growth in myself, both through funding, but also by connecting me with the patients who stand to benefit the most from this important research. And this has led to the establishment, on my part, and people I work with, an interdisciplinary collaborative network of vision researchers across Canada, fueling the discovery of new translational approaches that are going to advance these therapies ultimately to clinical application. Well, as I completed my scientific training, and as I've been training as a physician, I was overwhelmed as I saw the need in vision science, the need for new therapies, new paradigms, new ways of thinking about ocular health and disease. And that interaction with patients and their stories drew me closer to the issues that matter the most. Sight-saving therapies, now. Well, we live in a remarkable age. And we heard already about the different advances that are being made in gene and stem cell therapies, and I want to touch on that a little bit. But taking us back, I think it's amazing to see that in the span of the last 10 to 15 years, we now have an ability to sequence our own genome, our individual genetic code. And that's moved from something that was science fiction, when you watch old movies and television programs, to science reality. But beyond that, to science practicality and to science affordability. What cost nearly $400,000 in the early 2000s, after the first sequence of the human genome was revealed, now costs a few $100s. And with this new information so readily accessible to us, so is our focus on personalized medicine grown. We are all of us hungrier for data and evidence and how new therapies are going to work for us. And we've already entered the age of gene therapy, as it was mentioned. It's no surprise to me that the eye has become the proving ground for these therapies. And with the approval of that first gene therapy for Leber's congenital amaurosis, called Luxturna, in the States from Spark Therapeutics, that's one of the most severe forms of retinitis pigmentosa and affects the very, very young. We've opened the door to literally dozens of new gene therapy trials for various inherited retinal dystrophies. But it's not only inherited retinal dystrophies. The impact of gene therapy will be felt in macular degeneration. A company called RegenX Medicine is looking to deliver a gene to the retina that is going to allow the retina to produce its own anti-vascular growth factor medication. Many of you may be familiar with medications like Lucentis and Eylea that need to be injected into your eye every several weeks for wet form of macular degeneration. With gene therapy, we may give the hope the eye can produce its own anti-vascular growth factors to prevent that need for those injections. And I expect we'll see an exponential growth in this space as we continue to see the cost for those therapies drop and their efficacy, efficiency, and variety evolve. The field also, and from a personal perspective, eagerly awaits the approval of the first stem cell therapies for retinal disease and macular degeneration in particular, which are currently in clinical trials around the world. And many of you have probably heard about the replacement of the retinal pigment epithelial cells, the pigmented cells at the back of the eye, is so critical for vision. They're being done by various groups around the world, the cells that are lost in the very severe forms of macular degeneration. I think in a similar way, early success in those trials is poised to transform and open the field of cell therapy. Well, for myself and for many others who work with me, it's been a long journey with the promise of stem cells for regenerative medicine and promise of regenerative medicine strategies. But that is what it takes. That is what it takes when we're talking about fundamentally different types of therapies, different types of medicines, living therapies, living medicines that will literally transform our bodies. So I'll end by saying I'm very excited that the newly minted FBC is expanding their focus to other diseases like glaucoma that affects millions of Canadians, many of whom I see in the eye clinic. Transformative research in this space is needed. We have a bright network, a potential network of individuals across the country who can be brought together by leaders like the FBC. So I'll end by saying how pleased and how honored I am to be invited to speak here, and once again to share my thoughts and feelings about vision science and vision research with the group, and to celebrate the Foundation's next evolution. And for those who've been with FFB through the years, I think you'll be pleased to see what lies in store for vision research in Canada. And for those of you who are new to the FBC, I say, welcome to the family. Thank you.